All right, welcome to episode 2 of the Sixers Fastbreak Podcast. I'm Nate, and I'm joined by Evan and Ethan as always. Uh, so we are 8 days away from the Sixers season, and once again, we are talking about injuries, and injuries are the primary focus of this team. Embiid yesterday, in a Tim Bontemps article for ESPN, he said he will probably never play another back-to-back in his NBA career. This is in order to manage his left knee problems. So yeah, that's a major blow to this team because the Sixers play 14 or 15 back-to-back games this year. So that already scratches him from 14 or 15 games. So I just off the bat, in my opinion, I believe that this was the solution to, or not a solution, but a way to manage his knee problems for his entire career. Like this was something they should have done for a while now. And yeah, I mean, I just don't believe they've ever had the correct infrastructure to allow him to sit out that many games. So.
No, yeah, definitely. I think that it's good that we finally have a plan for, managing his workload because it seems like in previous seasons we've just kind of threw him out there, and if he gets hurt, he gets hurt. But now it's good to know that we finally got a plan.
No, yeah, I don't love it just because you'd rather have your superstar center be able to play as much as possible. I get it. It sucks to have to happen, but I get it. Like it's the only really you can't really solve a knee issue. Like this is something that even just past basketball is going to affect Joel Embiid for the rest of his life. And if you can't really solve that, they would have already. But it's something that it's a necessary evil kind of to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, as I said, this was something I thought they should have done for a couple of years now, and they just never. It wouldn't have been logical because of the personnel they had. But now, with the return of Drummond, I think it makes it even more feasible to have him miss that many games because I think Drummond could do a good job jumping into that starting role. In the 2021 season, the year we had Drummond initially, in the 14 games he started, he averaged 9 points per game and 13 rebounds per game, which that would be huge if we could get that for the 14 or 15 games that Embiid has already been scratched from.
And the rebounds you mentioned there, that's the biggest stat to me because I remember doing I don't think it was an article. I think it was just a little investigation in the middle of the season last year, just checking the Sixers stats like before or just with Embiid, without Embiid. I believe the rebounding numbers dropped from, I believe, like second in the NBA with him healthy and starting games to like, I want to say 27th. And like games are won in the paint when you're getting rebounds. Like the Sixers, just were out physical every single game. They couldn't keep up with these guys who they were needing to beat because they were strutting out Mo Bamba and Paul Reed for half the game. And, Andre Drummond, he's one of those guys. He's one of the best rebounders in basketball. So if he can just get those rebounds, we have guys who can get the points. He doesn't need to even put up 9 points a game. We have guys who can make up where he'll probably lack. So the rebounds is the biggest thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we've seen games, even not just total games, but in the time where Embiid's out, we've seen how much worse it is on the court, how confused the team looks, or whatever, just how the rebounding is not up to par. So bringing in Drummond to try and fix that problem is definitely a huge way to make up for Embiid's minutes because, I mean, last year we didn't do that, and previous years we didn't do that. But the only time we did do that was with Drummond. So, yeah, I think rebounds is definitely huge for the 15 games or so that we'll have Drummond in there starting. I think it's good that we get the boards.
Yeah, this team lost to the Nets and the Grizzlies back to back this last year. It was people forget how bad that was. It was horrible.
Yeah, I mean that rebounding was the biggest issue with this team. Period. Last season, I mean they got played off the court because of their lack of rebounding in that Knicks series in last spring. So, I mean Drummond's a great piece to have back. The thing that just overall this Embiid injury stuff is a little confusing to me because he hasn't played in a 5-on-5 scrimmage in practice. He hasn't been a full participant in practice yet. He's been seeing specialists, that whole kind of deal, and now this news that he'll never play back to back. My point of confusion is that he kind of looked fine in the Olympics. I don't know if this injury was re-aggravated during the Olympics or when this injury happened. So.
Yeah, when is a little bit confusing. I didn't get that either. And Evan, I'm sorry to cut you off there.
You're good. No, I also don't know if I believe him either. He's saying he's never going to play back to back again. I mean, it's a self-reported. I don't think that's actually going to happen. They might slow it down, but yeah, I don't think they're even going to end up doing that. But yeah, I don't even know when he even possibly re-aggravated it.
Mm-hmm.
Must have been over the summer with practice. I don't even know. But yeah, I mean, I just don't think that they're going to end up even going through this.
Yeah, and it was clear that like this is something that Joel Embiid, Nick Nurse, the coaching staff as a whole, the medical staff has talked about in depth for probably multiple years. I'd imagine like this can't be something that they just decided to do in like however many months since he came back from France. This is something that they've talked about for a while about doing. And for Joel Embiid, self-reporting, I wouldn't imagine, like you said, it was kind of a self-report there. I wouldn't imagine, they were thrilled that he would just go out there and say that. But just by the depth of like the article, it was a very good article that went like, really kind of touched up on everything there. I just can't imagine that, obviously excluding the postseason, that he'll never play back-to-back again. And like as for the when, I mean, maybe he messed it up he didn't in France. Everyone got a good amount of minutes there. The only guys who were really on the court for the entire time was like LeBron, because he's LeBron. And so like you said, as for when, that escapes me. It might have just been something that they discussed with before going to France, where it's like, hey, this is the game plan. Whether it's injured or it's not injured, you're not. This is our game plan. You're scratched for, like you said, about 15 games this year.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think that he is going to not play a lot of the back-to-backs, especially if it's a back-to-back like, the second games against Charlotte or the first games against Charlotte or Detroit or a team like that. I don't think he'll play those kind of back-to-backs, or he might be limited in those games. But I think that quote's coming from is that part of that article, he talked about how Embiid and Morey kind of discussed what's the path to get him fully healthy to the playoffs. And I think that's part of the solution, is that we're going to have to load manage him throughout the regular season. The title of that article was "The Sixers Kawhi-esque Way of Getting to the Playoffs" or something like that. I mean, it's I think they are really going to go the load management route with Embiid. And I think he's going to probably play like around 55 to 58 games, with the 15 back-to-backs that he's probably not going to play in. I think it's fair to rule him out of 10 more games. So 25 games around in total that I think he's going to miss this year.
I mean, that might have been why we brought in Paul George. That's why we were so adamant on bringing in him, to make up for the minutes and games that Embiid's out. So, I mean, I think, yeah.
Second on Paul George, he suffered an injury in the preseason game. I believe the report came out earlier that it was just a bone bruise. Thank God there was that really funny picture that went out on NBA Centel about 5 minutes after it happened. But, I'm just happy that obviously it's just the bone bruise. The season opener is up in the air, which is bad. Obviously, I don't know how much. Jared McCain is another guy who we'll talk about later. So it'll probably be Lowry. So dividing the point guard minutes there early in the season is really tricky, because you kind of want to see what you have in your bench players coming off the bench. So to have to just throw out a Kyle Lowry who could get a lot worse, a Jared McCain who could just be feasting off the preseason right now. So the season opener is one of those times where it's like you really see what you have in your starters, and then the bench players come along throughout the year kind of thing. So having him out for the season opener would be just weird for just Nick Nurse realizing what he has in this team, because it's a very new roster top to bottom.
Right. Yeah. So the report is bone bruise. He's going to be reevaluated in a week. So that puts him at a week from today, obviously, which is a day before they're set to open. I was talking with some friends last night, and I'm obviously not a doctor by any means, but I said in the moment that I think he's going to play game one. Because just by how it looked as hyperextensions go, that didn't look that bad of a hyperextension. I know hyperextensions can be they're hard to gauge as far as injuries go, and they are kind of one of those mystery injuries. Like it's hard to put a timetable on them. So I think they dodged a bullet that the MRI showed no ligament damage, but I think this is something that they're going to have to monitor for the rest of the season.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I don't think the opener. I mean, it's gonna be awkward, maybe not having George in for the opener, but I think you just play it safe. Let him rehab, get him in game 2. So I'm not like too concerned about him not playing the opener.
Yeah, and the no ligaments thing is amazing because there's not much left in his ligaments as is at this point. Right. So just the fact that it didn't get worse, it didn't get better, but it didn't get worse is just, if he misses one game, he misses one game. The season opener is kind of just like opening day for baseball, or it's like, if you get swept in this series, it's going to have little to no effect on your season. But, you want to see for the fans, you want the fans to be able to see like, hey, especially Daryl Morey, who was a guy who was so hated by, I'll say myself for a while, by a lot of the Sixers fan base, and he was under a lot of pressure this year. So to not have all the effort that he put out in the postseason, he really wants to show the fans that like, this is what I did. This is what I got you. This is what they can do. And maybe we'll be able to get that on game 1. Maybe won't be. It'll just be up to the doctors, and they might just end up playing it cautious and sitting him. I wouldn't. It's, the MRI next week is really going to determine it, because I think if it's 50-50, I think he's sitting, at least not starting. Mm-hmm. I don't think you'd want to risk it for a player who's just not exactly known for being the healthiest person in the game.
Yeah, I agree. I think if there is any question about his health or any concern with that knee, they are going to sit him for precautionary reasons. And I think that's mainly for the fact that that's the knee that's been giving him trouble for his entire career. He had surgery on that knee 2 years ago to repair a tendon, and he was out for both the 2 last playoffs before last year with the Clippers, because he had a knee sprain in that knee and he had soreness in that knee. So that knee has been giving him trouble, and that's been the reason why he's been infamous for missing games. So this is something that they're going to have to be very precautious with if they do see any type of damage to that knee, or if the knee's giving him any trouble. So moving on to, I think I want to look at opening night real quick. So opening night, we got versus Milwaukee, 2 they opened against last year. Kind of a similar situation if George doesn't play. We didn't have Harden to open the season last year along with the rest of the season. But it was an interesting game. I remember that game. They were pretty scrappy in there, kind of down to the wire. They ended up losing. But this time they're at home. I think that this game against Milwaukee could be a big tone-setting game for them. At home, you take one against a very, very good opponent, sort of set the tone for the season.
Absolutely. I mean, the Bucks go on. I mean, I said in episode 1 that I'm not scared of the Bucks, but that doesn't discredit them. They're still a very good team. They'll be in the playoffs 100%. But yeah, I think it definitely, this game's, it sets the tone for the season. It shows the fans and the media what the Sixers are going to be. Because start off against a really tough opponent, do it at home. I mean, it's not going to be as difficult as last year, obviously, in a away game. But, yeah, I think that this definitely could set the tone for what we could be for the entire season. So I think it's a must-watch game for every fan that's a fan of the Sixers. This is huge because it's Giannis versus Embiid, Lillard versus Maxey or George, whatever you want to say. But, yeah, I think this is definitely to set the tone.
I'm right there with you, and I think, like you said, not really being scared of the Bucks. I really don't see how this isn't. This should be with all the. I mean, we talked about it in depth last episode. Just all the investment, I think there was a stat that went around with like over 55%, I believe about it was, of the minutes played for the 76ers last year are now not on the 76ers.
Mhm.
Like 55% of the minutes throughout an 80 whatever game season is now mostly in Detroit. And I really see this as possibly a big win, like not just big win, like prove it to the media big win. Like I think this could be a around 10-point win because not only, last year, like we mentioned, the differences is that they're on the road in Milwaukee. It also wasn't the Doc Rivers Milwaukee Bucks. That was the Adrian Griffin Milwaukee Bucks, which definitely had its flaws, but Doc Rivers had a losing record with the Milwaukee Bucks last year. And I really don't see with not really the offseason they had, but more so what they didn't do. I mean, you have Chris Middleton, Dame, and Giannis, and, Brook Lopez is okay, but I don't trust Doc Rivers to take advantage of that talent. And I think there's also I don't know how much added pressure there would because a lot of the team didn't play for Doc Rivers, admittedly. But I think the fans will want it more. I think maybe Embiid, I don't know what his relationship with Doc Rivers was, but I know I want it more because I don't like Doc Rivers. So definitely a different, like almost the same starting lineups, barring Paul George, but it's just a completely different game. And the head coaches, the location, the expectations for each team. It's going to be a fun game to see where these teams fall in the East.
Yeah, I mean, you also have Paul George, who played for Doc Rivers a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put too much pressure on an October game because, frankly, in the long run, won't matter. But this is as must win as you can get in October. It feels like, especially if George is out. So if George were to be absent, who's going to step in for the first? Let's just call it a week that he'll be out for the regular season. Who do we have stepping up for them? You got guys like McCain, you got Lowry, you got Oubre is probably going to step in, or Oubre or Martin, whatever the starting lineup shakes out to be. Who will need to play the biggest outside of Maxey and Embiid in George's absence?
Kelly Oubre. I think they'll hook him off the bench. I think they'll start Martin. But, yeah, Kelly Oubre definitely has we've seen him fill this role before, each in the starting lineup. We've seen him do well. But, yeah, if George is out, I think that Kelly Oubre definitely has the biggest role to fill because he's the backup for him, possibly. But if he is the backup for him, then, yeah, that's the biggest role. That's the biggest player that needs to make something happen.
I think it'll either be Oubre or Lowry. I think Kyle Lowry, if Paul George were to probably go down, just as a veteran guy, I think he'll probably end up getting the nod at point guard because Nick Nurse, while I do think he's a great head coach, I think he really likes the veterans on his team. And I think that just because going back to last year against the Knicks, I think that not benching Tobias Harris during that series said a lot about how he looks at his lineups. So I think if he didn't bench Tobias then for someone in a way, that means like he'd value. I don't know where it makes sense it made more sense in my head when I was thinking about that. But not mention Tobias then, I think he'll stick with his veteran guy rather than a guy like Kelly Oubre, who's a little bit more. He's a veteran in the league, but not exactly like Kyle Lowry. Been there, done that. Overlapped with Nick Nurse before. And just a little bit more well-rounded on the defensive side of the ball. But honestly, I think both of them could fill the role perfectly in different ways. I mean, Kyle Lowry, I don't want to say a quieter presence, but Kelly Oubre, he really brought a level of energy to that team last year. I mean, like he really loved playing basketball in Philadelphia. So I think if you need a spark, just the team's hanging low, I think you put in Kelly Oubre. If you need a 3-point shot, really, you put in Kyle Lowry. I think Nick Nurse has a lot of free reign to kind of build this Sixers lineup without Paul George or with Paul George in his image. I think there's a lot of ways he can make things work, and I just think that's the perfect situation to put a smart head coach in.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think, in my opinion, I think he'd go with Oubre just for the continuity sort of view of it that you're losing a forward, you got to replace him with a forward. But I think Lowry's going to get the bulk of the point guard minutes, as we talked about on last week's episode. But hopefully we wouldn't have to deal with that. Who's replacing him for that long? Hopefully we get George back quickly and healthily, and Yeah. So let's talk about McCain. Embiid gave him high praise during training camp, saying that he was the best player on the team. Obviously, that's hopefully not true, just for the sake of the team. He had a big game against Boston in the preseason. He had 23-3. McCain's a very interesting player because for me, he wasn't the guy I personally wanted. I would have wanted Dalton Connect, but the more and more I've let it marinate, the more happy I've been with the pick because I think McCain might be a better quote unquote culture fit or vibes fit over Connect. And I think McCain offers more upside in the sense that he's not going to be a one-dimensional player like Connect is. McCain's going to offer the ability to handle the ball well. He's going to be offer the opportunity to be a great playmaker. I think he could be an off the bounce shooter. I just think there's a lot more to McCain's game, and I think that's why Embiid gave him such high praise during training camp.
Yeah, I think off of the preseason, I think what we see out of McCain is that it looks like he's gonna be like what Buddy Hield was and what Seth Curry was and what JJ Redick was. He's gonna be the shooter for the team, or they're trying to develop him to be that. But like you said, the backcourt of Maxey and McCain is gonna lead the league in vibes. So I like the pick. I like the pick a lot. I know you said Connect, but yeah, no, I think that McCain, he could definitely. I think he'll be an off the dribble or just sit in the corner or whatever. But yeah, I think of what we've seen so far, I'm very happy with how it's turned out.
Yeah, I'm right there with both of you guys for that one. And touching on what you said, Nate, about culture fit and whatever you said about leading the league in vibes. Jared McCann, he is just so fun to watch play the game of basketball because you can tell that like he genuinely just loves being out there, and he's going to give the social media team some great content throughout his time here. He's going to give some great moments here, and it's just I really hope that playing here doesn't take his love away from this game because it's not exactly a great track record here, unfortunately. But I think he's going to be, like you said, just kind of that shooter off the bench. You need someone who's going to just go in there, just produce and just be that guy, like you mentioned, Buddy Hield, Seth Curry, JJ Redick, whatever name you want to throw out there, Nick Batum even, just at the forward position for Nick Batum. I think he can be that guy, and it's just another guy. I'll always be rooting for him. He's just such a fun guy to watch. Dalton Connect would have been nice, obviously. It was a really weak draft class. I really think it was when you're picking that far back, it's hard to get that right. And for what we've seen out of Jared McCain so far, this is probably the best it could have gone.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think they did right with the pick, even though it wasn't my guy. It'd be awesome if McCain ends up being that JJ Redick or that Seth Curry type, because I think that's something that throughout the Sixers era with Embiid, they've always had a guy like that. Last year was Batum. He had Niang for a little bit. The guy who kind of plays that two-man game with Embiid, I think that's very important because it couldn't be Maxey, but I don't think Maxey needs to run a two-man game with him anymore. I think Maxey can create his own shot well enough that he won't need to rely on Embiid, and he can score in his own ways. So who do you think is going to have a breakout year this year for the Sixers? McCain, obviously the guy we just talked about, I think he could be a candidate to break out this year, but I don't know if we'll get enough minutes or see enough of the court to get there. So who do you guys think will have the biggest breakout year on the Sixers this year?
I mean, I've loved what I've seen out of Caleb Martin so far. We haven't talked about that much, but if you're watching McCain's highlights, then you see the pass that's leading to get to him. It's Caleb Martin driving inside, drawing the defense, kicking it out to McCain, hits the three. So I'm excited to see what Caleb Martin has to offer, and I think he had a decent role with Miami, but I think that'll be elevated now with the Sixers. I think he will be starting, and his playmaking, his rebounds, his size. I think that he absolutely could have a breakout season for us.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with Caleb Martin, and under Nick Nurse, under Doc Rivers, excuse me. I wouldn't think he would be that guy just because when you leave a system like Miami, which is just a phenomenally coached team, they found a way to make him work and made him one of the better forwards and just better players, just a solid guy to have in your rotation, right? And I don't think I would have trusted Doc Rivers to get that out of him. Nick Nurse, I do trust that he'll find a way to get him in there, and he already is, like you mentioned. He's already finding ways, and his role is mainly going to be, feeding the rest of the offense, right? Because he doesn't have to be the shooter because we have plenty. He doesn't have to be the rebounder because we have plenty, mainly now Embiid and Drummond. He's just going to kind of fill those gaps. I think McCain could definitely be that guy, but Nate, like you said, I don't really think he'll end up getting the minutes that he'd need. I think he'll definitely, the last game of the season compared to the first game of the season, I think he's going to have a lot more minutes because I think he's going to prove something. I just don't think it's going to happen all in one jump for him, unfortunately. And I think, for a team like the 76ers, there's not a lot of room for a breakout candidate almost because it's just a team of mostly proven talent that just needs to prove they can work together and mainly prove that they can work better than the other teams in the East.
Mm-hmm. That last part I think is very interesting because my pick was Maxey. I think for this team to reach championship level status or to be a championship contender, they need Maxey to take one more step up. And I think that step up for him is being able to be a great isolation scorer. And as I said just a few moments ago, not having to rely on Embiid so much, that will make Maxey sort of, to put a title on it, be an all-star starter type of player, top 5 in the conference type of player. I think for the Sixers as a whole to be successful, he needs to take that step up to be a great isolation scorer, and I think he can do it. He's taken massive steps in the few years that he's been in the league so far, and I think that for the Sixers to take a massive step, he needs to become the primary ball handler on the Sixers team. Because again, going back to Embiid's missing the back-to-backs, Embiid's going to miss a bunch of other games. Max has got to be able to step up and provide some more 50-point games as he did last season. So,
yeah, and the one thing, especially in those non-Embiid games, I love Tyrese Maxey to death. The one thing that he did, because the light is always green for Tyrese Maxey. He will never not shoot the basketball, which is great because he has confidence. It's something you want out of any player on the court. The one thing, because he's very hot and cold sometimes, right? Sometimes he'll just take the inbound and run down the court, not even take time to try to do anything. He'll just put up a 3 and it's going through the net like it's nothing. And he's going to do that for the entire game. He's going to drop 50, like you said. Mm-hmm. But then there's sometimes he does it and, he takes the inbound, runs down the length of the court, and then doesn't even let time for the offense to develop and just bricks a 3. And like that just needs to either be cut out of his game or just become more consistent because it just, especially when you're going to have so many, it felt like in those non-Embiid games, I think that's what I'm trying to say. In those non-Embiid games, he felt too much pressure on himself to create offense that he would just go down there and before the defense even gets a chance to really adjust to him, just chuck it and hopes that it makes it there almost out of a fear that he can't get it done with the rest of the guys there almost, which is branching out maybe a little bit too far. But I think that's one of the main reasons, the non-Embiid minutes is what's going to define this team. That's an obvious thing. And I just think that's the one area where hopefully he's now realized it's like, hey, the main ball handler is what he needs to be. He doesn't exactly need to be the main. He doesn't have to have the most shots anymore is kind of what I'm trying to say. Because, now you have Paul George, you have maybe even Jared McCain. You just have so many more guys who can help take the relief off of him when Embiid's not playing specifically.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point because I think the biggest example where we saw that Maxey kind of came up short was Christmas Day last year when Embiid was out and they played the Heat in Miami and he came up completely small in that game. And that was just, if Maxey can become a guy who you have no worry about him coming up big in those type of games, I think this team will do just fine. Aside from the acquisitions of Paul George and Caleb Martin.
And he comes with experience. Because, I mean, he's still young. He's, 22 years old, 23 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, another year under the Nick Nurse system, give him time to, and now have more chances to play with Embiid off the court. So, I think that he'll develop. He'll develop that game.
Yeah. I think that was kind of a bit unfair criticism of me because, as you mentioned, he's very young. So putting these standards on him might be a bit too premature.
It's a tough spot for any young point guard to be in. I think he's handled it greatly to kind of build off your point there. You know, Maxey, since the day he was drafted, has been on a team where, for one, where he was drafted, he wasn't exactly expected to still even be here at this point in his career. You know, when you pick him where you pick him, he's not exactly expected to be, you know, a most improved player and one of the best guards in basketball now, I'd like to say. I think he's handled it very well. Now he's ascended a lot quicker than most players to do than like having championship expectations on him. Because, like, you know, when Evan said he's only 21, 22, I was like, oh yeah, this kid's still really young. Like, he still has so much left to improve on, and he's already so good. It's just a lot of expectations on him early, and I'm just trying to, you know, give him a little praise because he's handled it very well.
Yeah, of course. So the biggest thing that I think this team, a lot of people say, oh, they still have Embiid, they still have Maxey, and now they have another. It's just a different third star for this team. So, like, what has really changed with this team year to year? And I think the biggest change, what makes this team different from previous years, is the acquisition of Drummond that we've already mentioned. I honestly think that to some extent that acquisition was bigger than the George signing, because for the simple reason that every year it ends up that we're talking about the Sixers backup center. And I think now that we have one who has proven to be successful with the Sixers, that's something that we can sort of check off our list in terms of something to worry about.
Yeah, I agree. We've always had a backup center as our biggest hole in the team, but now I can't tell you what our biggest hole is because it's a very balanced team now. So, yeah, I think that the Paul George signing is huge, but Andre Drummond and re-signing Oubre and just keeping the team together, but gaining depth and filling the holes that we need to fill. Yeah, I think that the thing that makes this year different from other years is that there's not a clear weakness.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest difference for me, and obviously Drummond, huge, just like we mentioned earlier, the rebounding, even the experience. He's one of the older guys. You know, he's had experience even to like mentor guys like Adam Bona, who is really kind of the Drummond replacement if we're looking really far in the future for whenever that comes up. But the biggest difference between this year and any Sixers team is the head coaching position to me, because Nick Nurse did what Nick Nurse did last year to me. You know, being able to, and don't get me wrong, the team wasn't good without Embiid, but to be able to basically trot out those lineups of Tyrese Maxey, Kelly Oubre, Kyle Lowry doing what he can, and just keeping the team, I barely even floating above water, but getting to where he did with that team, almost beating a really good Knicks team in those playoffs. And obviously not everything was, there was a lot of, I'm not going to bring back all of this because it's October now, but there was some, I'll say, questionable officiating in those games. I remember having to write the game recap for that and just wanting to do basically anything else in that moment. It was horrible. But I think the head coaching position, I mean, Nick Nurse is not a perfect head coach, but he is, and this has been proven by Doc Rivers' tenure in Milwaukee so far, and Nick Nurse is here, obviously. He is eons better than than Doc Rivers was, for the 76ers. And I think that is going to make the difference, because sometimes championships will come down to the brains behind the roster, and that is such an upgrade for us from Doc Rivers to Nick Nurse.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. When the coaching seat was vacant for the Sixers, Nurse was not my first pick, but I can definitely say now I am very pleased to have Nurse. I think Nurse is one of the brighter or sharper coaches out there. I think it's very like when you actually think about the other coaches in the league, I think Nurse is one of our advantages against any other team. Like he's a guy that's not going to get out coached. I think the reason we lost that Knicks series wasn't because Thibodeau was the better coach. It's because the reffing, as you said, I remember the officiating and injuries, just how the team played. But I think like if we were to go up against a team like Boston and talent's a little bit more even, I think our edge comes with Nurse over Missoula, because I don't think Missoula is that great of a coach. But I think Nurse can coach himself into an unexpected win here and there. So
Missoula's really funny though. those post-game interviews, man, I'll see him on TikTok here and then. He's like, the royal family was there, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. I'm like, this guy's not serious, dude.
he is an oddball for sure.
He's something.
So I remember we talked about it at the end of last episode, or maybe after last episode, doing a 15, like doing our all-star teams or something like that. Do you guys have your teams, or we could talk about
I'm definitely down to do some all-star. I don't really have anything written down, but I'm down to just spitball with you guys.
We can freestyle it.
Okay, let's just start with the Eastern starters. So I think this should be pretty easy. Obviously, the three locks are Giannis, Embiid, Tatum, and then I think you get a little questionable with the rest. I think Brunson might be a lock, actually. So you got those four for the starters. Then
Halliburton.
Halliburton.
I don't know if he'd be a starter.
No, I mean, because just by all-star rules, it's got to be a guard.
I don't know if he'd be a starter.
I love Halliburton, but just thinking about, so the other guards we have, I think last one has to be a guard. So it's got to be Maxey, it's got to be Lillard, Trae Young, Mitchell.
Trae Young without DeJounte Murray could do even more. I mean, he might end up just piling up even more stats than he usually does.
Doesn't equate to wins, though.
It doesn't. It never does in Atlanta.
I mean, I think also, we got to think Halliburton's got Siakam now.
For a whole season, too.
I think that helps him more than hurts him for his games.
Yeah. I think Siakam could be a starter. I mean, he was really good in the postseason, except for not fouling Jaylen Brown on that 3 in the conference finals.
Yeah, I just don't know if Siakam can start, though, because we already got Giannis, Embiid, and Tatum.
I don't think he makes it in over any of those 3, but I think he could give Tatum a fight. But Giannis and Embiid are, barring injury, I think
would Embiid even be eligible? Because
hopefully,
is there a games requirement for the All-Star? I thought that was just for awards.
I'm not sure, but like if you play half the games up to the All-Star game, something like that, then
I mean it's fan vote, so I don't think it would help this case.
I mean, they could vote in Towns now.
I don't think they will. We should get into that more sometime, because that trade still confuses me, and it's 8 days to the, or not even 8 days, it's like 6 days to the NBA season tip off.
I mean, I'll jump into that, talking about that trade, because that trade also is baffling.
It's something. I mean, you see Dante DiVincenzo?
Yeah, that was hilarious.
Going at Rick Brunson.
Yeah, I didn't realize he would be that mad about the trade, but when you break up from your Nova boys, I guess so.
I mean, thought I saw a report that he didn't like the Nova Knicks, though.
I mean, it lasted 3 months.
I thought I saw a report that like he was never in love with the idea of the Nova Knicks being a thing, which I guess they're not now. So he got his wishing away, but
yeah.
Well, I just assumed he liked the idea by how upset he is at or how upset he got at the Knicks last night.
It was
Yeah, it's
unexpected. I'm surprised Cat didn't get in there.
Cat,
Insert himself somehow.
We know Cat's background when it comes to confrontation. He is not the confrontation type.
Big purr.
All right, so
Although he did get in the headlock that one time with, was it Ben Simmons? Remember that? Like 5 years ago?
Whoa,
that's
headlock. Forgot about that. That was something.
Yeah, I was at that game when Embiid and him got in the fight.
Seriously?
Oh, really?
That's sick.
Yeah. All right, so I vote that we put Halliburton as the starting shooting guard for the East team.
I can work with that.
All right,
definitely.
and then so jumping over to the West, I think the West is much easier.
Yeah, Jokic is a lock.
Jokic, Doncic, Curry, LeBron, Shea.
Yeah,
I think that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
Durant in there.
Durant could be in there.
Say KD could be in there. I think maybe Devin Booker. I like Devin Booker. I don't think he'll start. I think he could give someone a fight. It's not Curry, but it might be Shea.
I mean, the main guy that I think that could actually make a serious run would be Wemby, but I just don't know who.
I don't know if he gets in over Jokic though.
Not over Jokic, but maybe over LeBron.
Two bigs.
Yeah, I mean,
I think if he ever started leading over LeBron, I think the entire NBA would revolt. And it would just become like when they tried to vote in Martin Maldonado to the All-Star game, except it'd be for LeBron. I don't think they'd let that happen, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the NBA would let LeBron come off the bench.
No.
The All-Star game.
No.
Nothing against Wemby, but
yeah,
I don't think that would happen.
So I think, the East.
West might kill the East just off that alone. It might be. I mean, I don't know about you guys. I don't know if anyone's gonna be watching that game.
Unless they fix something.
Which they won't. Adam Silver likes to make changes. I don't know if he likes to make. He likes to make changes. I'll leave it there.
I mean, how do you even fix it though?
Yeah, that's the thing because no one wants to play.
Yeah, there's no incentive. So.
I mean, I like the idea of just making it a money tournament. Why not? One-on-one tournament would be kind of fun.
Be interesting.
But
that still doesn't I think the main issue with the All-Star games, the players don't want to get hurt. So no matter what they do, the players are not going to give 100%. Like especially Embiid. Would you want Embiid playing in a 1v1 tournament?
No.
No, that's a good point. I don't think about that.
No.
So here, I like this. I like the topic of expansion because I'm kind of conflicted on it. I don't know where. I mean, I know where they'd expand to. I think it's Vegas and Seattle would be the two.
Yeah,
I just don't like
in there too.
Where?
I think Pittsburgh could get involved, but from
really?
what I've heard, just from a lot of Steelers fans and Penguins fans, is that they struggle holding up 3 teams. So I don't know. They don't get it over Vegas or Seattle though.
No.
So that would be a much further in the future thing.
Yeah, well, Vegas is a lock.
Vegas if they do expansion with how the Golden Knights have worked out. Not with how the Raiders have worked out. With how the Golden Knights have worked out. Vegas is a lock.
And how the A's are about to work out.
We'll see.
They're playing in Sacramento for a couple years, aren't they?
Yeah, they do. As they're building a new stadium. But
they'll be 4 sports city if they do basketball. I just realized that.
Mm-hmm. Technically 5. Count the WNBA.
Technically 5. Asia Wilson. I just messed that up. I'm so sorry.
I think it's Asia.
I'm so sorry. This show's getting canceled. It's over.
I just personally I don't like the idea of expansion because I think how the talent's distributed right now is fine. But I think they should do some relocation. I think Vegas should definitely have a team. Whether that's OKC that moves or I don't know one of the Texas teams. I don't know if you need 3 Texas teams. Like San Antonio maybe moves.
Logistically, I get it, but like San Antonio is such a storied franchise.
Right.
I don't think you can move
of course.
You can't.
Oakland, maybe, but not with OKC, excuse me.
Yeah.
Maybe like before, but now that they've got this championship core intact, I don't think you can move them then.
And they
maybe
probably
Charlotte, because they've had problems with attendance in
Yeah.
the past.
Yeah.
probably could move. I think,
And like to be fair to their fans, they have not had much to root for. Like I don't know if it's that much of a fan base issue as much as it is just
I
a
would go to the
product
games.
on the court issue.
Yeah.
I don't really just know enough to speak on that.
yeah, I
Well-
mean, OKC should move back to Seattle, and then a team like Charlotte moves to, or New Orleans. New Orleans moves to Vegas.
They just
I mean,
traded for
we're just
DeJounte
naming
Murray,
teams
though.
we're just naming teams who have bounced around before.
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, New Orleans, they don't have a following down there. Everyone in New Orleans
No.
cares about the Saints.
yeah.
So
It's a rough scene in New Orleans. If you've got a buddy from New Orleans, reach out. Make sure he's doing all right. Because I don't know. I think expansion just the NHL has done some dabbling in expansion. I mean, the Utah doesn't really count because it was Arizona moving over, but obviously they recently added Vegas. The WNBA, obviously a lot different of a situation. They've gone a lot with expansion.
Mhm.
I think for the NBA, which is expansion would be a really risky move because the 2020s for the NBA in a larger discussion has not been a great decade so far to this point because you've had a lot of NBA finals with very memorable moments. I mean, this past postseason in particular was not very good for the NBA when the most you had Nuggets Timberwolves go to 7, but all those games were blowouts. You had a really forgettable NBA finals. And other than that, the most memorable series were maybe Sixers, Knicks, maybe Cavs, Magic, but you just didn't really have a lot to build off of. And when you're in this really cool period in the NBA where it's really transitioning from the old to the new, like we saw in that Timberwolves Suns series, even you need something to hang your hat on. It's like this is the game we have, and right now, arguably in all of the 2020s, they don't have that.
Mhm.
So expansion is the timing of it will be really difficult to get down for them, and
You need some. Yeah.
you
Sorry,
need a win. Really, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, you need something to define the 2020s, and I mean, I think it's the perfect time. Out with the old, in with the new. I mean, throw in Vegas. Like you said with expansion NHL, Seattle got a team, so it's like
Seattle. I forgot that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, if you want to go all new, then I don't see a problem with it. But I think expansion going to 32 teams, that'll take a while to get used to.
Yeah.
I think relocation would be more realistic, but it's just who would relocate. Like we said, Charlotte, New Orleans. Just there's not a ton of low market teams. It's not like I don't even know. Like I can't
Charlotte
even name
seems
one.
the most likely.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to go all new, then I think that might be the perfect time.
I mean, the NHL was in a similar spot too. I mean, they had some not great finals, and if it wasn't for the Oilers making that a series, they would still be in that same boat. So it's the NBA, I think it's a big season for the NBA, just in that you need something, whether it be you could have a really just dud crappy first 3 rounds of the playoffs. If you have a really good NBA finals, basically, because this season didn't stink because an unlikable team won it all, is because that they won it all in 5 games. None of the games were particularly close for that long. I mean, you had maybe some memorable moments for individual fan bases. Obviously Celtics fans will remember this forever. I think Magic fans will have fond memories of this season because, they really took that step forward that not a lot of teams expected them to. The Timberwolves fans will remember this one. But, you think of 2016 NBA, the first thing that comes to your mind is maybe that, LeBron block in 2016. You don't have that yet, and it's going to be 2025 by the end of the season. So you need something here.
I think I agree with Evan that this might be the perfect time to expand, to have a defining moment this decade. I also think like I said, I'm fine with the talent distribution right now, but I think part of the reason why these playoffs are such duds is because a lot of teams are becoming top heavy, or at least
Yeah.
a lot of the talent's becoming top heavy. So expanding, kind of distributing the talent a little more wide would allow for more interesting playoff series. So I think playoff or expansion in general is a good idea. So is that all we got for this week?
Might be.
I think so.
Unless you guys want to throw in something, I'm good.
Yeah, I think we've hit on the two major things this week were the Embiid news and the Paul George knee hyperextension. So cover those two. Hopefully we get George back before game 1, or hopefully he's cleared in the week. So yeah, thank you for listening to week number 2, episode number 2 of the Sixers Fastbreak Podcast. Again, I'm Nate with Evan and Ethan. Tune in next week. We'll be back with episode 3 before opening night.